Hello and welcome back to another Wild Wisdom Wellbeing guest slot. And today I'm absolutely delighted to have with me the wonderful Nuria Rodriguez. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. But Nuria is a nutritionist and a woman who explores the wisdom of plants and all that plants do for us and for our well-being when we digest them, when we take in all that they offer to us. And we're going to look particularly today, because we are women of a certain age, at perimenopause and menopause and what plants can offer us at this time of our lives. And there seems to be an awful lot about perimenopause and menopause in the news. And there was the Davina McCall program, which I recorded and just watched earlier in the week. So it seems to be a very topical issue to be exploring. So I'm so delighted that, Nuria, you're able to join me today and share some of your amazing wisdom. But would you start just by telling us a little bit about who you are and what brought you to being a nutritionist and exploring plants in particular?
Great, fantastic. Thank you very much, Robin. It's amazing to be here with you in this space. So thank you very much for inviting me. And also for the question, because in fact, becoming a nutritional therapist, it wasn't a decision that I made from one day to the next day. It was a real journey. And the journey, or perhaps not the beginning of the journey, but at some point, plants came as part of the journey, and the love for the plants, and to discover the energetics of the plants and the magic of the plants. So yeah, basically, I mean, what brought me to what I'm doing now was as well my exploration for sustainable ways of living, and be involved in sustainability mainly. So I discovered permaculture, and as part of permaculture, which is a sustainable design system that can be applied to all sorts of things, all sorts of stages of life, work, home, family, community, everywhere. And so as part of that learning of permaculture got me into growing my own food and growing food for others and growing food in community and learning, and not only food but also gardening in general. And then is when I started being amazed basically by the magic of the plants, they how the plants interact in their environment, with the soil, with wildlife around. And I studied horticulture, organic horticulture, and I thought, yeah, this is the thing. And but thinking about and being amazed about the interaction of plants we in their environment and with their environment, I thought, okay, so how plants? I've always liked food and cooking and stuff like that, and I thought, okay, how the plants and the food in general is interacting in with us, inside us, in our body. And this is really what took me into study nutrition. I studied for 4 years, and I just was amazed again of the power of food, how much it could do to our lives, to our bodies. And I thought, okay, this is my mission now, to try to reach as many people as possible and share the knowledge, and help people to understand how they can use food for their own benefit and for the benefit of their health.
And I
Yeah.
think the saying of "you are what you eat," it's maybe taken too far in some instances, but at the same time, that's what our bodies and our cells have to work with. That's the building blocks that we give ourselves. And therefore, we want the best way for optimum health is to give ourselves the best building blocks we possibly can. And I love what you're saying about the magic of plants and how they do interact with their environment and with the nature in all its forms all around them. My mum gave me an amazing book a few years ago that was all about trees. And reading that, I learnt about some plants, trees, how they send chemical messages through the air to one another, signaling danger or signaling now is the time to flower and send out, because if they're wind-borne pollinators, the pollen has to come and land on the female flower at just the right time in order for pollination to occur, and all of that sort of stuff. And also how the roots go out and how trees connect with each other underground, physically connect, and through the use of mold and fungus, how they connect and form this massive great network. Before we ever had the internet, they had their own web underneath the ground, sending messages to each other all of the time, and how parent trees can look after little ones, their offspring. And it really just, reading that book and watching the film Fantastic Fungi, Fabulous Fungi, I can't remember the name exactly, but it's on Netflix. I think it might still be there. But just how these things, these organisms that we often tend to dismiss until we start looking into them and seeing that maybe they don't have a brain and they don't think the way that we do, but they still have an intelligence and a wisdom that we can learn so much from. So yeah, another reason why I'm absolutely delighted to have you here. And it's not just all of that connection in the physical form that we can see, but like you were just mentioning very briefly there, the energetics of the plants. And I went on a workshop some years ago to learn about essential oils, which is another product that's plant derived, and the wisdom that that holds, and that coming from the essential oils come from the defense mechanism of the plant, but can be used by us for our well-being, and how that's constantly changing depending on the environment in which the plant grows, so the climate, the soil, everything that goes into the growing of that plant. So year on year, it changes, and the bacteria can't keep up, which is why they're very effective antibacterial, antiviral, anti everything, really. They're so good for supporting our well-being in so many ways. So you were saying about how you've observed plants, you've tasted them, you've cultivated them yourselves. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the permaculture and the horticulture that you studied. But can you then tell us a little bit what you've learnt from your observations of plants and your interactions through tasting and studying them?
Yeah, yeah. And it's really interesting what you said before and about that communication and how the plants sense really. And before I answer your question,
Mm.
I would like to let you know, I don't remember the name of the book, but there is a book where, I mean, this is not a new book, it's an old book that used some mechanisms to study the plants. They used a device that they used to use to detect if someone was saying a lie or not. And they applied to the plant, and they saw that, for example, if I am, or if they were, or they had the intention, yeah, of going towards the plant with a pair of scissors to cut them, the plant reacted. Isn't it amazing? Yeah, as you said.
I've heard that,
Yeah,
yes, and it
great.
just blew my mind.
Yeah, exactly. And that is a scientific research. That is
Yes.
not something, it's just amazing.
Kirlian photography, I've seen images, and that's, I think, where I heard that they could tell the plant senses your intention. So, as you say, the scissors haven't even made physical contact with the plant, and it already reacts.
Amazing. Isn't it amazing? I love it. Yes. Okay. But going to back to the question and what I learned from experiencing the plants. I mean, it took me a while really to understand the plants and the energetics of the plants. And obviously there is a lot of observation, and it has to do a lot with being in the moment and being present and being with the plants and experiencing. And I remember what it was really, really revolutionary for me, and was working with studying, more than working, studying with a herbalist who unfortunately is not here with us anymore. His name is Christopher Headley, and he very well known national and internationally herbalist. And he developed a system of learning about the plants from within. So, not about going to the book and reading about the plants, but having the plants in the form of herbal tea, and experiencing, first of all, observing them, being with the plants, uh, feeling them, sensing them, smelling them, um, maintaining them in the mouth, drinking them, and observing how our body systems reacted to that. And we had study groups, and with other herbalists and acupuncturists, amazing people, all of them. And we played to drink. We had herbal drinks of the mystery herb. So we didn't know what herb we were tasting. We didn't know what herb we were drinking. And all our comments were, once we tuned in, they were so connected to what the books and research had done. So yeah, when you ask, I mean, what you learned about all that is about, first of all, we need to be in tune. We need to be in tune with ourselves, but we need to be in tune as well and connect with the plants. We need to connect, and if we are doing horticulture, etc., it's about how much, I mean, we are connected with the soil, because all this is so helpful as well for our health. So in clinic, for example, I'm not working just with food, but also we work with lifestyle and things like that, how important are for the health of people. Yeah.
And everything is interconnected and interdependent, isn't it? And unfortunately, our medical system has often just become very Newtonian, so very mechanical, and it focuses just on the one area that
Yeah.
we experience, that we're currently experiencing the symptoms in. So if you have a sore knee, let's look at your knee and what's wrong with your knee, versus, well, your knee is part of your leg, and your leg is connected through your pelvis to your back. So if your back is out, then maybe we need to look at what impact that's having mechanically through all of that chain, but also what environment are you living in? What beliefs are you holding? What stresses are you carrying? What challenges are you facing in your life right now? Because all of these different aspects will have a role to play. And we're multi layered beings. We've got physical, emotional, cognitive, social, spiritual, all having an impact on our well being. So it's all those layers to look at and consider and discuss the kind of interplay of them all as to how that could be impacting on the knee or whatever it is that's experiencing the symptoms.
Yeah.
Yeah, so absolutely. I love that you look at the whole, you look at the plant in its environment, and you get tuned in and kind of you have a dialogue with the plant, asking what wisdom. It's that openness, it's that curiosity. And often I think we have quite fixed expectations of plants, and we think that's just a plant, and it grows in this environment, and it does this, and it produces this fruit or whatever. We don't think of what it must be like living in that plant, stepping into its shoes and thinking, what might it have to say today? I just love that you're kind of doing that. You're really opening up, as the Native Americans and probably all Native peoples did with the environment in which they lived. They really tuned in and connected and knew that they were connected on a deep level, and that they were all one, in a sense, all made of the same materials, all coming from the same origin. It's such a beautiful way, and such a way that we learn about ourselves too, because when we come back to that center and come back to that present moment and just be open, just be curious, and just allow, I think that's amazing.
Yeah, which is much of what you do as well. Yeah, it's lovely. It's lovely. And as you said, I mean, it's about the whole plant, the whole of us. I mean, the whole of the self. And exactly because it's very different to look at the individual constituents of a plant than to
Mm.
look at the whole plant and all the synergistic aspect and effect or impact of the plant by working with the plant. With the whole plant, it makes such a difference. And it's a bit the same, yes. I mean, you mentioned about how conventional medicine is only looking at one system as opposed to looking at the whole. And yes, exactly. I mean, possibly. I mean, I think conventional medicine is great in many aspects, and but looking into, for example, nutrition, and what I'm doing is we look more not so much about the system, the body system, but about the connection, interconnection with the body systems, as well as the function of the body systems. And obviously the function of the body, or even the function of one system, one body system, you cannot isolate it. Perhaps it's easier to isolate, I don't know, an organ or even the complete digestive tract, but you cannot isolate the function because the function is fluid. And yes, it is. I think that's why functional nutrition or functional medicine are so, I don't know. So much connected with
Well, it's
plants. Well,
that
yeah,
idea of being holistic and integrated. And
yeah,
although a plant will have its different parts, it will have its roots, its shoots, its leaves, its flowers, its seeds, and those may offer different aspects of what the plant offers, but there's still interconnection the same for us. So,
yes,
yes, our organs, our tissues are, you can look at them to a degree in isolation, but then having done that, it's still important to consider them as part of the whole. And I love that, you're looking at function there, because that's very much what I do, and look at, well, why would something do that? And when something has gone out of balance, what is the out of balance function trying to achieve? How is it? It's always trying to get us back to balance, but where does it feel that it's off? So by studying what it's doing at the moment, I can see, oh, okay, that's where it's off, because it's trying to do this, trying to get back by doing this, trying to support, trying to give us back that sense of safety by doing whatever it's doing. So can you tell us a little bit more then? As I said, I'm really interested in permaculture. Can you just give us a kind of overall understanding of what you do to what permaculture does, how it works, how is it sustainable versus what we might have done for years, sort of, I want to say traditionally, but maybe permaculture is actually more original tradition. But what's the difference between permaculture and just general gardening or growing?
To tell you the truth, I mean, I got into permaculture quite a long time ago, and life has been flowing and diverting a lot. So I haven't been much in contact with permaculture. Permaculture, how can I say, with permaculture? But what is really interesting about it, about the design system, and opposed to the normal conventional gardening, perhaps it is what we have been talking about, is about how we, the interconnection of things, how a system is, we think of a garden as a system, and understanding how the microbes or whatever, and all the wildlife living in the in the soil, how is that, and what you explain, I mean, basically what you explain about the trees, this is permaculture, is about observing observing nature, observing patterns in nature, and replicating that in our, in the design, in our environment, or in our, if we're designing something, if we're, now that you are painting, for example, and decorating your home, how can you implement some of the natural patterns, or the, not natural patterns, but the observation of natural patterns, so to make the design as more efficient as possible. And this is what you find in a garden, permaculture garden. You connect everything, you design everything around making things efficient. So you use less resources, you use what is available to you, etc. And this is, these are the principles, yeah, in gardening and permaculture, as far as I remember, to tell you the truth. But definitely it's about designing things in the most efficient way, um, based on the nature observation. Yeah.
And it sounds like what it is in a nutshell would be to work with nature, to work with the garden that you're living with. And this makes so much sense to me. Years ago, when I was going on my journey, I was given a project to transform the garden where we lived, which was just a big square of grass and moss, and it was very heavy clay soil. It was often very damp. And so I started off by putting in some gravel and put in a trellis and an archway so that I could grow things up that, and put in beds. And we had a bit of grass left for a while, and then we transformed that. We put in a pond, and wildlife started to come. And also, I had this design in my head. I was going to plant this thing and this thing and this thing that I wanted to have in my garden. So I did all of that, and some of it didn't survive because I hadn't looked into what did those plants need. And a lot of them needed sandy soil when we had this heavy clay, and it was often soaking, and water would pool, so the plants drowned because they were designed for hotter countries, or at least better draining soil. So I had other plants then that self-seeded and went rampant. They just loved it. One of which was Welsh poppies and also forget-me-nots. So every April, May, I would have this sea of blue. And then a little bit later in the year, I would have all these little yellow flowers cropping up everywhere. And it was beautiful. And over time, having fought against this garden, I realized, why am I doing that? Why don't I just allow the plants that love it here to thrive and to do their thing? And I had primroses that self-seeded and cross-pollinated with cowslip, and all sorts of lovely, lovely flowers in this garden when I just let it do its thing.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know what I was doing, but I just let it get on with things. And it taught me so much, like you're saying, just the observing and just the being present. And that whole thing about nature just does her thing. When you allow her to do her thing, she blossoms, she brings forth, she's really fruitful. And each season comes around and you get a new chance, like a new day or a new season. And yeah, it just supported me in my learning and my growth so much. But it was that learning that it's okay. You can just allow, you can play, you can experiment, you can learn, you can grow, but bringing that then to my life. So working with nature, why not work with my nature? Because so often I think, and maybe particularly as women, often we have this love-hate relationship with our bodies. We maybe don't like how we look, or I wanted straight black hair as a child, and I was given curly blonde hair, but now I love it and I just let it go wild.
Yeah.
Um, or we don't like the shape, or we don't like our nose. And we compare ourselves to what's in the media, which isn't real anyway. A lot of the time, it's so photoshopped and airbrushed. But going through this process and looking at nature, and she's so beautiful. She may not be perfect, but she's perfectly imperfect. And so are we.
Yeah, I
And
totally agree with you.
so, yeah, I think she teaches us so much and so beautifully, not always gently, but always spot on. So, can we then look at, you were saying about when we eat the plants or we drink the teas and we take the plants into our bodies and they share their nutrition and their wisdom. You've studied nutrition and you've looked at plants and how plants can be used to support our well-being, and you've looked at this around perimenopause and menopause. Can you share a little bit about plant nutrition and how that supports us so effectively?
Yeah, it's very interesting what you said before and now this question, because when you were talking about how nature uh, teaches naturally in a beautiful, graceful way,
Mm.
I was thinking exactly about perimenopause and menopause, because it is and then you asked about, and because it is a graceful and natural process that all women we go through, and teaches us a lot, because exactly what you said, when we are younger we don't like our nose, or we don't like our hair, we don't like many things, but during perimenopause and menopause, our not only our biochemistry changes, but our mind changes as well.
Mm.
And the perception of things, the perception of ourselves um, changes. And we easily accept many things that we didn't accept before about ourselves. Sometimes we don't accept what others do and don't do. But I think it is a process, a beautiful process,
Mm.
um, that that it should be. How can I say this? It's a beautiful process for all women to go through and be aware of it, and the opportunities and the magic that brings to us, and the present and gifts that bring to us as well. Um, which is really what got me into wanting to support women going through perimenopause and menopause, because I found so many women that are going through really tough times during this transition, hormonal transition, and it can be the other way around. It can be so magical, and it can be so beautiful and unique time in our lives. So yes, and obviously working with food is essential to support our body, because our body is going through definitely a transformation. We're experiencing some changes in hormones, and not only sex hormones but other hormones as well, and sex hormones, and especially estrogen has receptors in many tissue, in tissue in different organs of our body, and that's why we are experiencing so different reactions. We're experiencing so many symptoms, etc. So it's about, yes, how we can support our body naturally, how we can support our body with food, and obviously to balance out all these potential biochemical imbalances. So it's not just about the hot flash. It's not about the headache. It's about what is happening underneath that is causing that, and how we can support that nutritionally and with plants. And especially during menopause and perimenopause and premenopause as well, which it could last. I mean, all this period could last up to 10 years. So there is plenty of time there to prepare for a natural and really rewarding, I would say, even rewarding and magical menopause. The problem is that um, somehow other we're busy with other things and we don't want to accept it, or we just don't have the knowledge. And because we don't have the knowledge because it's something in society, basically in the society where we live is we historically we didn't have the learning about menopause. Yes, there are many things we can do with plants and food in general, but there are specific plants that can support our transition, and especially at different times of the transition. And and there are I work with some of them. I have an interest in them as well, and some of them are like, for example, Vitex or Vitex, like Agnes castus and black cohosh, and then all the plants that offer and have phytoestrogens, the plant estrogens that are going to support through our journey. And it's, we talked about it before. We talked about how the whole plant and can support our bodies. And it's funny because there is quite a lot of research in some respect, but still there is so much research to do. And still we can experience, I mean, there is evidence, experiential evidence. So we see that, for example, Agnes castus can be used better before menopause because it has a balancing, a hormonal balancing property between estrogen and progesterone. And progesterone is one of the hormones, sex hormones, that tend to go low during the perimenopausal times. Then we can, for example, black cohosh. There is more, I think, more research around black cohosh, but still there is more research to be done, and it's more estrogenic plant that supports some symptoms during menopause, like, for example, hot flashes, or even sleep patterns as well. That is very interesting to see how, even if it's a estrogenic plant, it so this is a bit technical, but anyway, is connected and affects the serotogenic receptors in the body. So it affects basically the serotonin aspect and metabolism in our body. And there are other plants which are some of my favorites as well, and foods that they are the phytoestrogens, and they are plant estrogens, and they are very funny plants and very funny foods. And they are like, for example, the red clover and soy, and there is another one, Pueraria mirifica, which is not very common. I don't see it used much in the Western country, but it's coming from Thailand, I think, and Burma. But it's very much used there. I've used it sometimes, but you find as well phytoestrogens in foods like yam. And it's funny how in cultures and countries that use yam on a regular basis, they have a completely different experience going through menopause and perimenopause. When I say they use yam not as in supplemental form, but as a regular food type of food. And the phytoestrogens are really, really interesting, and I think funny, because they, for example, if you're having a lot of phytoestrogenic food, that those, as I said, is red clover, soy, and then flaxseed is another type of phytoestrogen. Um, if you have that, even supplementation, it doesn't show in, for example, in blood test, it doesn't show the change of estrogens in your blood test. However, it's been seen that supports your cholesterol levels, supports your lipid profile, supports, it can support your bone health and even memory and brain health as well. And even it's funny because, well, it's not funny, I think it's great. I remember in clinic testing a woman who had osteoporosis already before becoming menopausal, and she had been taking phytoestrogens, and we tested when she was already postmenopausal. And as I said, the estrogens, the level of estrogens in the blood didn't show um, up. However, we tested as well not the bone density, but the speed at which this woman was losing bone. And the results were she was losing bone as if she was a pre-menopausal woman. And she was a postmenopausal woman with osteoporosis. So what I mean is that phytoestrogens do something, must do something. Yeah. So, and yeah, this is yeah, how plants and food can affect and support us during these times. Yeah.
It is just magical, isn't it? And I think there's so many points in all of what you've just said. And I love that you said that there are different experiences of perimenopause and menopause in different countries, different cultures. And that may be largely to do with food, but there are also the beliefs and the expectations that you get from your culture, from the people around you, from the experience of the women who've gone ahead of you. And I think that maybe cultures that are more in tune with their bodies and more in tune with the surroundings, more present and connected, have an easier experience because I think they just see it as something natural. Whereas often in the West, we have, I don't want to use the word resistance, but we push back against some things. If we are in the West, we're quite often now businesswomen. We're either working or, as in employed, or we run our own businesses. And we then feel we have expectations, particularly if if we're working in a very male dominated environment. And we don't then have the time to just, I'm starting to enter my perimenopause. Maybe this is a time that I need to spend just with me, going inwards and listening to my body and exploring what's this change bringing, what things are shifting in my life at this point in time. So I'm shifting perhaps from my fertile years, maybe being a mother, and going into the crone years, as they're called, and how much of a gift that really is. But often, because maybe of the media or things that we've heard from other women, we're thinking, oh, I don't want this, and this is going to bring night sweats and poor sleep and hot flushes and bad, mood swings and all of these things, which it doesn't necessarily. And how many of those things are actually due to the menopause, and how many are due to other things that are happening in our lives, and even to our belief systems, which is very much a cornerstone and a core of what I do, that actually it is our beliefs that manifest then as symptoms when the beliefs aren't supporting us and our body's trying to tell us that. But the fact that our crone years can be very special and very magical, and in some cultures, I think that's more of their perspective, versus in the West, I think there's less of that belief. And is that, at least in part, why we are struggling more than, like you were saying, the cultures that have yams in their diet. It may be the yams, but it may also be their belief system, their culture, their way of aging. Because we don't age very gracefully often in this country. I love that word that you used. So I think there's so much within this whole phase of a woman's life that we could explore, that we could maybe find ways to go through more gracefully and more smoothly by connecting in, by listening, by tuning into our bodies, working with them, just seeing this as something that's very natural. It's a gift. A lot of other animals, they go past their fertile years and they don't live longer. We do. And we then go into this age of the crone, which is the age of wisdom and the age of being able to share so much from that perspective. So yes, you were talking about perspective shifting and belief shifting and all of these magical gifts that come at that point in time. And yeah, how much the plants, you talked about plant synergy. A lot of medicines are extracted originally from chemicals that were found in plants. So aspirin coming from the bark of a willow tree. But when they've been extracted and isolated and created in a laboratory, they don't have that synergy anymore. And they often then have side effects, which the plant doesn't have. And that, like you were saying, we have receptors in our body. We've evolved alongside of these plants to work synergistically with them. So when we can find these natural remedies, whether that's a food we eat or a herbal tea that we drink or whatever it might be, how much more in tune our bodies actually are already designed to be with those things that we're taking on board. So you mentioned flaxseed is a really good one, red clover, yams. What maybe herbs or things that we can eat or add to our food if we're experiencing perimenopause and menopausal symptoms? What are things that are easily accessible for us here in the West that we could maybe try and play with to see what supports us and supports us at different times as we go through this transition?
Yeah, well, those ones that I mentioned, for example, they are widely available. Perhaps they are not available in our gardens. Yes, flaxseed is a bit difficult, but red
I know a
clover.
really good link if anybody needs flaxseed.
Oh, right. Okay. Okay. Lovely. You mean national produce here or what?
I think, as far as I know, I've met the farmer.
Mm.
I met him in West Sussex, so he's over that way somewhere. I don't know exactly where. It probably says on his website, but I just
Yeah.
order the product.
Fantastic. Yeah, I would be interested definitely in that. And for example, red clover is everywhere in the lawns. So it's everywhere. And red clover tea. Obviously, I always say I learned that having tea, a herbal tea, 3 times a day becomes medicine. So I mean, these things we're talking about here are general, but what I want to say is that people, if it would be good to consult with any health professional, etc., especially if they have some issues. But everything we're talking about here is general. But the red clover, and also in terms of, I would say all the plants and all the plant food, because one of the most important things to go through perimenopause and menopause so gracefully is to balance obviously our hormones, but not only, as I said before, not only the sex hormones, but insulin as well, and for example, blood sugar balance to get. I mean, this is why we sometimes we experience so many hot flushes, etc. I mean, one of the most important things to do is to balance our blood sugar levels, and And one of the ways we balance blood sugar levels is with the fiber of the plant food. So I would say really all plants are beneficial for this year, for this transitional years. The more plant food and the more vegetables, diverse vegetables and colorful vegetables, the better. This is another thing. You said this at the beginning. I mean, the plants, they have powerful mechanisms of defense, which is what give them the characteristic of the plant, is what give them the smell of the plant, what gives them the color of the plant. So that's why we need a diverse, very, very diverse diet, and especially diverse diverse diet in terms of plants and the plants we eat, because all the different colors, all the different shapes, all the different smells are going to give us something special. And and fiber, the fiber of the plants are going to help us regulating the blood sugar levels in our in our bloodstream. And this is the basic and most important thing for women to go through a graceful menopause. Yes.
And they say, don't they, eat a rainbow for precisely that reason?
Exactly.
Because
Exactly.
for a start, you eat more fruit and veg when you have to bring in all of those different colors. But each color, like you say, has a different chemical composition. And it's the nutrients that each then color provides. So you're taking in more and more diverse nutrients, all that your body needs to be those building blocks that you are what you eat. But also we are what we absorb. And that's where belief systems and synergy and working with the plant, being open, just giving our bodies permission to rest, to be able to fully digest, to therefore be able to break down and absorb those nutrients. So it all comes together. And this is something I think that probably perimenopausal and menopausal women also struggle with, because it is a transition and change is often challenging. And when you're doing that as a working woman, which we wouldn't have been years ago, and in a world that's so fast paced, so busy, so full of stress, that just adds to the challenge. So it's so important to make time for rest, because the opposite of fight and flight is rest and repair. So that's where we need to really make time for that rest in order to experience that repair and to be more graceful as we glide smoothly, hopefully, through these transitions. So that's really what I was hoping to share with this message today, to give ourselves permission to take care, to tune in, to engage in that deep, radical, profound self-care, which can be such a challenge at this time of life, but which is gives us such benefits. And it's not only for ourselves, but it does this for everybody around us as well. So it's by no means selfish. It's one of the best gifts that we can give to everybody as well as ourselves. And if we're mums and have daughters, what better way to role model how to go through a good perimenopause into menopause and to live a healthy life and to avoid those things that we're told are related to old age but aren't necessarily. So the bone density that you talked about, Nuria, and the osteoporosis, that actually that doesn't have to be something that we experience. And they were saying on the Davina McCall program about the relationship between the hormonal changes that women experience and dementia and all of the aging diseases. And you were talking about blood sugar, which obviously relates to diabetes. But if we can take good care of our bodies and eat this wide variety of plants and vegetables, then we are going a long way to supporting ourselves against these diseases that are now becoming like epidemics in themselves.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And you're totally right. It's about what we absorb.
Yeah.
It's about, because what we eat, we might not absorb it. So it's about what we absorb, and getting into that state of appreciation that you were describing, and tuning in, and being present. That is going to help the indirectly to improve the absorption, because it's going to improve the digestive function, etc. And um, I totally agree with you. It's not easy sometimes to have that super um, self-care, but it's like everything. It's just getting into the habit. And what breaks a habit is another habit. So if we are not in the habit of looking after ourselves, if we're not in the habit of being present, if we're not in the habit of being in tune with ourselves and what surrounds us and nature, etc., let's break that habit with starting being in tune, starting being present, etc., etc. And it will take a little while to get into it. But once we go over those, I don't know, they say that is 21 days, or I don't know how many weeks you get into a new habit. Once we get into that, we don't want to go away from that, because it's the most rewarding and the most amazing thing. And I'm sure that obviously, Robin, and many people, I mean, whoever is watching this and they have experienced, is the best that can happen in your life on a daily basis. So yeah, let's be the warriors, and let's support people, and let's support ourselves to get into that tuning in with us and the rest, and nature. Absolutely.
I love your word appreciation, because I often talk to people about what they eat and how to make healthier food choices, what those healthier foods are, because often we get mixed messages. But I also say it's not just what you eat, it's how you eat it.
Yes.
And that I've got a friend who's a nutritionist, and she talks about how when we eat our food, our digestion starts well before we actually put anything in our mouth. So the whole preparation. And when we eat a lot of fast foods, processed foods, that maybe all you have to do is pierce film, stick in microwave, turn on the microwave, wait for the ping. That doesn't give us that preparation time. And the smells of the food, the color, not just inside but externally, our senses, all of our senses coming into play. So what we see, what we smell, what we feel as we prepare the vegetables, all of our senses are coming into play then. It's a very mindful exercise, but it also gets our digestive juices flowing, ready to receive the food. So your saliva in your mouth, which helps to break down the food before it gets to your stomach, chewing properly, taking the time to sit down and eat at a good pace, not just shoveling it in, chewing properly, because that all helps the stomach then when the food gets there to digest at the right point of that breaking it down. So it's not getting chunks that are too big that it's not designed to cope with. So, and that helps with things like indigestion. So all of the aspects. And I think when you talk about a habit, absolutely. Quite often we get into less than supportive habits, but the way to stop those is not to focus on them at all. It's to create the new, as you said, such a good point. And yes, they say 21 days for a new habit. And that's a good grounding, but it's still staying conscious, staying aware, just observing, and not to beat ourselves up if we slip back into old habits, but just, oh, there we go again. But each day, each moment, each mealtime is a new opportunity, and we can start afresh. It's not like, oh, I ate a cake, I'm off the diet wagon. Not that I'm into diets as such, but it's just, that's okay. That's one little thing in the whole of your day, the whole of your week. and that's okay. So it's just, I'm going to stick with this, because knowing that, as you said, Nuria, you start to feel so much better that you don't then want to go back. But it's just getting over that initial hurdle and realizing how much better you can feel, and then going from there.
Yeah.
So thank
Awesome.
you so much, Nuria. That has been really inspiring and informative and exciting to think that we have all of this available to us, all of these tools, all of this magic right
Yeah.
there that we can just dip into and play with and see what we can create.
Great. Fantastic. It's been lovely being here and sharing the time and the conversation with you. I loved it. Thank you very much.
So thank you, everybody who has tuned in live or who will be watching the replay. Do stick in a hashtag replay if you're watching in that form. And if you have any questions for Nuria, for myself, any comments even, we'd just love to hear from you. Stick it in the comments below. And just again to say thank you very much, Nuria, for joining me today.
Pleasure. Thank you. See you later.
Bye for now.
Bye.